What up, HyperChange? Welcome to another episode. We've got the legendary guest, Tesla Larry, back in the hot seat. I wanted to pick his brain on his epic idea for the Tesla share swap, consolidating Muskonomy empire. This is, I think, kind of not only a very interesting move to contrast the SpaceX IPO potentially, but also gives us insight into how much cash Elon's companies will need and the future, sort of the financial engineering that goes on behind his empire. So very fired up to dive into this. So Larry, you put together a little presentation for us here. Maybe walk us through what we're looking at.
Sure. So if you look at the first slide after the introductory slide, and if you can bring that up, Gali.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's motivating me to talk about this is the kind of capital requirements that we're talking about needed by the Musk companies in the coming couple of years. If Elon is serious about the projects that he has mooted. And, you know, we know that Elon is always serious. So what are the projects that we're talking about? We're talking about orbital compute. And so that's all about putting satellites, kind of like Starlink satellites, but in a slightly different orbit from the current Starlink satellites, but into an orbit where they're always going to get sunshine, and that sunshine is going to be their power. So we did a back-of-the-envelope calculation on orbital compute and how much CapEx they'll have to spend. And if we want to scale really to the kind of levels that Elon is talking about, the numbers look like something like $100 million per gigawatt. And if we scale 100 billion, that should read actually, 100 billion per gigawatt. If we scale to 7 gigawatts, that would be $700 billion of CapEx. That's a very formidable amount of capital. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I guess the key thing that you're saying here is even if SpaceX were to raise $100 billion, that wouldn't necessarily be enough for the CapEx requirements for all of Musk's empire. So you're like, wait, let's, instead of the SpaceX IPO, let's do this share swap because there's way more capital raises, and Tesla, this consolidated Tesla, because they have more assets and they're a bigger company, will have an easier time accessing the capital market. So can you dive in a little bit more on like the why behind this? And what
the why is that the amount of capital that orbital compute, gigafab, the cybercab fleet, the Optimus fleet are going to need is getting to the $1 trillion level. And right now, the cash flow from any one of them is a little bit down the road. There's a timing for each of these cash flows against the capital spend. But there's an enormous amount of outlay between then and now. So you may get good cash flow. For example, Starlink is flowing about $5 billion a year, getting to that order of $5 billion a year. We have the car company flowing to about $2 billion, a quarter, and maybe a little bit less in the fourth quarter of this year, or maybe zero in the fourth quarter of this year, even negative. But typically in a quarter, they're going to flow about $2 billion. So that's $24 billion a year. But other than those two flows, that's about it in terms of sizable cash flows. But we're talking about, an investment that could be as much as $1 trillion across all of these projects. And the real problem is there's always some cash required for each one of these projects. Some cash is required by each one of the components of the company, of the total Muskonomy. So how to balance that cash flow and the cash needs and the credit capabilities of these different entities, and the sum of the whole is greater. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So if you put these together, you'll have a much stronger case to be made for raising this kind of capital and for normalizing the cash flow from the various entities into the cash needs. At the bottom of this is it eliminates the problem of the conflict between these companies, both as to cash needs, cash flow, but also in terms of interests of the parties and the use of the resources, the personnel, the technology, and so on. So when you consolidate them, you create an entity that has much greater leverage in the capital markets. It has much greater means to move that capital around between them, and so on. Unfortunately, you can't just put them all together because I don't think Elon would end up with control of the end entity. So I think you have to start by acquiring Tesla, acquiring all these other companies, at least a proportion of the stock that leaves Elon in control of the subsidiaries, but also gives Tesla a meaningful stake in all the subsidiaries. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally. And it almost feels like now's the perfect time to do it with the timing. And I really like your statement of like, there's all these different projects at once. If we kind of roll them up into one, all the bumps kind of get smoothed out and it becomes a lot easier. Yeah. So I've kind of been wondering, okay, well, if Elon got this idea for data centers in space, this is going to require a ton of capital. Why didn't he just raise it in the private markets? What is it that because it's hundreds of billions and that would be ridiculous to do privately? Or so is he kind of insinuating?
It's way. I mean, the answer is very simple. I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go for
when
it.
When you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars tending towards the $1 trillion mark, the private markets would never be able to support that. It would just be impossible. This way, you can access the public markets, the very deep public markets in the United States, but also the public markets across the world.
Yep.
So you're talking trillions instead of billions in the public markets.
So in some ways then, if we play that out, then it's like, okay, well, the reason why he's IPOing is because Elon's decided he needs 100 billion or plus in capital. And so if you're deciding to take on that much capital, you must have a smart way to spend it. So I'm kind of curious of what's changed. If I thought the limiting factor for SpaceX was getting Starship to work, but it almost feels like he's thinking 2 steps ahead if it already works. We're already thinking about building the CapEx to get Starship going. And if you think about Elon moving fast, like trying to go as fast as possible, it's essentially like, wait, like if it's going to take us this much time and money to build Starship and more capital is the bottleneck, then why wouldn't we just raise more capital? But it's kind of, I'm trying to put the 2 and 2 together of like, why now did he decide capital was the bottleneck? Because up until now, it almost felt like it wasn't.
Okay, because the plans have just exploded. You were at the the shareholders meeting with me just a few months ago. At that meeting, he talked about orbital compute, he talked about the gigafab, and he talked about the cybercab fleet, and he talked about the Optimus fleet. Add that together, you get to $1 trillion of capital requirement. Think about, and by the way, that doesn't include Starship. That doesn't include capital for Starship. I haven't added, 10,000 Starships to this total, and I've got to $1 trillion. 10,000 Starships at $5 million a Starship, you're at $50 trillion. $50 billion. So, I mean, the capital requirements far, far outweigh anything he's talked about. So if you look at just SpaceX, Starlink, and Starship, just that, SpaceX would do fine, going to the markets, going public and raising $30 to $50 billion. They'll do fine. That covers Starship. And Starlink is already producing $5 billion a year. They're going to go to $10 billion next year. They've got the cash flow that will keep SpaceX churning along until you add orbital compute. So who's going to finance the orbital compute? Is it going to be Tesla or is it going to be SpaceX? My argument is that neither one of them can bear that weight fully. It has to be both of them together.
Wow. And what do you think Elon's thinking about this? Like, if he looked at this proposal, what do you think his reaction would be?
I don't think Elon will react well to this proposal. Elon doesn't like what he considers to be financial engineering. Elon likes simplicity. In his mind, SpaceX is SpaceX, Tesla is Tesla, and he looks at the worst case condition. Tesla could go bankrupt, SpaceX could go bankrupt. He doesn't want the one to impact the other. And that's a fair point of view. That's a very fair point of view. That is the argument against this. The argument for this is if he really wants this program of orbital compute, gigafab, cybercab fleet, and Optimus fleet, he has to think much larger than either of these two companies can think. He has to work a scheme that ultimately brings them into a single company. They are, in fact, if you look at Elon's personal balance sheet, they're a single company. The problem is he doesn't have access to the cash flows of each company. He only has access at the share ownership level. Mm-hmm. And that gives him far less flexibility. I'm looking to the future and the flexibility he's going to need, both in deploying the cash flows and in implementing the plan. So, let's assume Tesla generates huge cash flows, but SpaceX doesn't. He can't move the cash flow from Tesla into SpaceX at this point, and vice versa.
That's a good point. He would have to do like a separate investment of now Tesla is officially giving the cash to SpaceX somehow.
Yeah, and then you'd have to figure out the terms and conditions and so on and so forth, and it'd be a lot easier if SpaceX were in fact a subsidiary of Tesla's.
Well, and the one thing that, to the argument of simplicity, seems like if you have the kind of bank of Tesla essentially doing all the capital needs, isn't that a lot more of a streamlined of a process than every single company doing these capital raises in their own little silo in some ways?
It could be argued both ways, but I think if you combine the five actually, you get a much, much more vigorous capital base. You get a much more malleable capital base. You get the kind of structure that you can move the pieces around with much greater ease than if you have five separate companies. Right now, there's absolutely no argument to be made for moving any assets from Starlink to Tesla or any assets from Tesla to xAI. Combine the companies, or at least make each company a subsidiary, if not wholly owned subsidiary, but a subsidiary of Tesla, then the movement of personnel and capital between the companies becomes much easier, and it makes the whole structure much more malleable.
Can we dive into why now is such an interesting time for this proposal, especially with the voting rights, essentially? Because I think that would be, that control is obviously on Elon's mind, on everyone's mind. Is like, we don't want, Glass Lewis to be running this company or whatever, some proxy firm. So walk us through a little bit of your thinking here. You've managed to, at a high level, come up with a way where Elon can keep 50% control over all his companies, I guess, except Tesla, which would be essentially almost better than he has now in some ways. Is that even right?
No, let me pause that. Look, right now he's got about less than 20% of Tesla self, and he has absolute control through a golden share in SpaceX, and he has absolute control of the other companies through his majority ownership.
So he learned and went through super voting with SpaceX, as he was like, I want to do a separate class. And is SpaceX the only one that has this super voting class?
The answer is I'm not sure what the voting structure is of Neuralink or Boring Company, so I can't answer that. But here's the thing. He's got such a large percentage of Neuralink and Boring Company that I don't think it makes a big difference. However, he could sell enough of Neuralink Boring Company and SpaceX into Tesla to make Tesla if not a controlling shareholder, at least get it to the point that it has to consolidate those companies into its balance sheet, and he can still retain control of them. And that would boost his shareholding in Tesla by at least 2.5 to 3 points, which would put him within shooting distance of 25% of Tesla, such that he only has to hit 2 of the milestones of his plan, rather than 5 milestones of his plan. So he could be in control of Tesla within 2 years rather than 5 years' time.
Ooh.
So,
and eventually own more. Eventually, he could go beyond 25%.
To 30% is my estimate. Yeah. So and by the way, that also gives him the opportunity of selling the balance of those companies to Tesla and getting up to a 50% mark. So I mean, it's very
Ooh.
On paper and in theory, it sounds very delicious. I mean, it could also go the other way. I mean, one of these companies could go bankrupt, and it could, yeah.
If I'm getting this right, okay, so then let's say Tesla has takes a huge stake in Neuralink. Neuralink gets huge, then Tesla could buy the rest of then Tesla buys out the rest of Neuralink, but Elon Musk owns so much of that he would then increase his ownership in Tesla.
Yeah, that's the plan.
So he could go, how high could he get of Tesla if all this works?
I think the big opportunity is SpaceX. I mean, ultimately, it could be argued that he could sell his golden share and control of SpaceX. I think SpaceX is the one that's going to grow bigger and faster than anything else.
Yep.
And so he only relinquishes his share in SpaceX when it will, secure a 50% or such a meaningful stake in Tesla that he becomes, absolute control of Tesla.
This is a kind of, I don't want to get us onto a tangent, but I just thought of this, and this is one of my friends, shout out to Aiden, had this interesting comment that was like, what happens post-Elon, or if anything happens to Elon? Because he's set himself up as such an influential shareholder that what happens with his shares is like super duper, I don't know, it's just like everything relies on that. So do we have any idea what his plan is or how that would even work?
Yeah, so Elon has put a fairly significant number of his shares into a trust. And so it's, we don't have any visibility into the governance, into how he has planned the governance of that trust when he passes. But our experience with Ford and, Howard Hughes and other mega billionaires, trillionaires, what is the equivalent of trillionaires today, is that, you pass the control of the company. In Ford's case, he passed the control to the family. And it's quite possible, Elon has got a very large number of children.
Yeah.
Some of them are extremely bright and extremely capable, to my knowledge. And it seems that several of them would do very well running the company. I keep thinking about my hero, Edison. He passed his company on to his son. His son didn't do very well with it. And and the company dribbled away. But Elon has got, he's got some really capable sons and daughter, and he's got a couple of them that are still very young. So time will tell. But it seems that that would be the way I would go if I were him. I would trust my lineage more than I would trust some third party.
And if you're speaking strictly from like a Wall Street angle, analyzing that situation, what do you think happens? What is the market's interpretation of that? Is it, I feel like it could get rocky and pretty crazy, especially if Elon keeps shooting for the moon. That's what I keep thinking. Like he keeps every time, he's always got a project that's 20 years ahead that he's working on.
Yeah.
And so the chance of those projects being succeeded without him is like zero, in my opinion. Or I would immediately assign it to zero, you know?
They would be zero if the company was placed in a trust and somebody was appointed to run it. Yeah. But if it were entrusted to a family member that he felt, or a group of family members that he felt comfortable with, that shared his vision, then I think it would probably be quite possible for it to continue. You know, he comes from a remarkable family and his children are remarkable children. So it's more than possible. It's more than possible that they could carry the torch forward. More than possible.
Is there any precedence in history where someone has built this big of an empire?
Rockefeller.
And that, I'm going to look like a real amateur here, but was that the oils, and then they had to, break those up essentially?
Yeah, but the Rockefeller family still maintained control of Exxon, into second generation.
Yeah. But they broke it up into Chevron too, right? Or something?
Oh, they broke it up into the seven sisters. Sisters, literally. 7 companies. It was that big. But what remained, this goes back to my high school years, my college years, so you'd have to go back a long way. But as I recall it, it was broken up into Esso and then the 7 sisters, and they had one of them, and that remained in the family for some generations to come, and very successfully.
Yeah, interesting. So, because I was trying to think if there's any historical precedents for this kind of thing, and you have to go back a long time. Like we're kind of in a little bit of uncharted waters. And as much as I was trying to think of this as like when we have these insanely successful people in history, like Henry Ford, or, they make these big impacts. And then it's almost like what happened with Steve Jobs. Like Apple still crushed it, and it has gained so much value since he's gone, but it lost the soul. And that was the day they started decaying. So I feel like that's as unfortunate as it is, that is probably the life cycle of, capitalist empires.
But look at the Ford family. The Ford family, Henry Ford passed it on to his son, Henry Ford II, who actually saved the company, by the way, because Henry Ford went kind of crazy in his old years. But Henry Ford II kind of saved the company. And that company remained very viable. And when General Motors went bankrupt in the global financial crisis, Ford survived. Why? Because the family, instituted the actions necessary to keep that company alive. And it's still owned by the family today, and it's still successful. People think it's going to, its demise is written in stone because of EVs. But all I can say is that there's a company that managed to maintain its position for many, many, many generations.
Yeah,
I think 5 generations, 6 generations.
So it can be done. So this is another hole to poke in because I'm always thinking of, we're so bullish and optimistic. I feel like we're in this weird kind of like euphoria of like everything can go right. Elon's going to take over and get so big. And then I'm kind of playing out these other things of like, he's already worth 700 billion. Like Rockefeller's thing got broken up because it was so big, like when things get this big, there's a almost market mechanism of breaking them up and attacking them, which I think I can't like tell you how it's going to happen. But I do think there's like clear socialism, like coming, like this idea of some people shouldn't have all this money. And it's honestly kind of hard to argue against. Like when my cousins are like, my Italian cousins, it's like Elon Musk, troppi soldi. Like, no, it's not right. He's got too much money. It's not, there's no even. Like, how are you going to say that, Gally? He has 500 billion and this guy is sleeping with no home. How is that fair? And like, I can see that being way more than 50% of the population feeling that. So how do we, if you're a Tesla or Musk investor, even just a tech enthusiast, how do you think about where we're moving as a society and like trying to put that into the investment thesis? Because that's where I'm almost like, I'm like, at some point the music stops. Like people are going to get sick and tired of like the 2 million people who are shareholders in the Musk economy being so much richer than everyone else. Everyone's going to hate them. I don't know. I'm like, I don't like to think about this, but then in some ways it's like, as an investor, you want to think through all the bad things. So to me, the greatest risk for Tesla is we need Elon as CEO. That's number one. And number two, I call it the dummism, new Luddite movement of, you know, just because someone else is successful, they're the enemy. So do you think about that? Am I going crazy paranoid here about that being a part of the risk of investing in Tesla today? Or how do you even think about that?
I think you're right on the money. There is that risk. Elon attracts even more hatred due to his, his political predilection. His predilection to become active politically, which, traditionally is a really, really bad thing for a billionaire to do. I mean, you only have to look at Henry Ford and his alliance with the Germans. I mean, it was a terrible situation. So your point is extremely well made, and times are getting really tough in terms of the socialism. And we've got a mayor in New York who's publicly said that he's a socialist, and so the times are very. The public is extremely divided. And Elon's political activism really plays against him. So you're absolutely right. And by the way, it's a strong argument against combining these companies because it makes the target even richer. So that is a negative. There's no doubt about it. Not that these negatives have ever influenced Elon's strategy.
I mean, he's going to IPO SpaceX. Talk about getting heat and negativity. He's willing
Absolutely.
to go in there. So
absolutely, there's no question about it. I mean, you only have to see, today. I mean, yesterday or just in the last week, NVIDIA announced that they're going into autonomous cars, and immediately the stock drops. Why? Because all the haters come out and say, "You see, it's all going to happen. Everybody else is going to have it. Blah 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 blah." And so you get this extraordinary blindness and willfulness in these investors because they hate Elon. And that's all there is to it. And so Elon is very exposed in this regard. So, that's a real problem for investors in Tesla, and it's a real problem for optimizing the company's all the company's financial situation. But on the other hand, Elon's never cared about that in the past.
And has it stopped him? Like you can point to the NVIDIA stock going down, but it's like Tesla's worth $1.5 trillion with like $5 billion in earnings. Like I'm pretty sure the vote is pretty clear. We believe Elon and are supporting him and don't give a crap. So that's what's so interesting is like everyone's always like, well, the stock didn't jump after earnings. The people are in charge of it or manipulating it. I'm like, no. The people in charge of it are the visionaries like Ron Barron. Yeah. The market is you can't have an opinion. You almost just need to watch the market and accept that is what it is. And so the market's telling you the clearing price for Tesla is way above the normal PE. It's way above whatever you think the business is today because. So I think in some ways that gives me some pause. And it's like Tesla and Elon aren't doing bad things. What they're doing is actually super good for the world. And in many ways pushing towards socialism because it's healthcare and housing and abundance for all. So that gives me some pause of like maybe eventually people start getting off their phones and get a new app besides Instagram and stop being so polarized, and that'll actually diffuse the situation. So I think there's like as much as I'm negative on it, I think the pendulum could also just swing back to like this whole idea of like the most productive people sucked was actually kind of wrong. So I'm hoping that. But anyway, I don't want to get too. Do you have any comments on that?
But I've lived through this so often, Golly. I at the time of Nixon and the Vietnam War, there was equal fervor on the left. There was equal hatred towards capitalists. Yeah, I mean there were riots in Germany. What were they called? The Red something, red brigades or something, would riot in Germany. I mean, the whole country was aflame. There were riots in Paris. The whole country was aflame. And here in the US, there were massive anti-Vietnam War protests, but they were all aligned with, an extremely strong socialist movement. And, times change and the world revolves. So I think this too shall pass. But your point is extremely well made. The problem is that, we have an extraordinary amount of fraud and just grift in the economy that's built into our government. We haven't had the clearing of all of that through some reform movement. It seems to me that a reform movement in government is the most important method of getting this country back on track. Far more important than destroying billionaires. And I think that would increase the earning power of the common man in the street, and would somewhat, compress this. But you're right. If a future of abundance were to arrive, a lot of this would go away.
So yeah.
I think there are multiple paths to how this resolves, multiple paths. But in my 80 years, I've seen it oscillate backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And I think that oscillation is going to continue.
I have a prediction about the end of the how this resolves, at least with the Musk empire. Then I want to come back to your final slide here to wrap it up. But I think it ends in, I've been thinking about this a lot, is there's the runaway moment of like chaos where it just, there's too many projects, there's too much money, Elon gets too old and tired, and it's like, there's chaos in every direction. It's not going to end with like a neat bow on it and everyone gets $1 gazillion and like click, it's Tesla Muskonomy, perfect. It's going to end in chaos. SpaceX is going to be fought for this way. Tesla's going to be fought over this way. Neuralink's going to have the CEO that takes it's going to be like I just feel like when it almost like, I feel like I'm like, it's kind of bad to think about the end of the Musk empire, but it makes me appreciate what we have while it's going, because it's like this, like, it's like a bullet train. Everything else is like moving so slow, and the Musk economy is this bullet train that is like, so whenever it stops, it's going to be this huge explosion, kind of like the more inertia, the more.
You failed to factor in one very important point. Elon may be of all, the good things and bad things like everybody. He has positives and negatives, but one of his strongest skills, actually, I think it may be his single strongest skill, is his ability to hire. He has an extraordinary ability to hire. And so amongst his dozen or so kids, I've lost count, amongst his dozen or so kids, he will be able to choose and find the right one to take the mantle. That's my judgment. And if he does, I think this company can not only survive, this Muskonomy can only survive but prosper. And maybe it's multiple of the kids. But I think this economy, this Muskonomy can survive and prosper. Now, there's obviously the possibility that he chooses the wrong person, that it ends up in a squabble and it's a mess, and everything you say is true. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to be a Ford kind of situation rather than, a Howard Hughes kind of situation.
Interesting.
Remember, Howard Hughes had no progeny that he recognized. Elon has more than a dozen.
It's I feel weird talking about these like end of empires things, but it is interesting. Like, this is one of the biggest things in history, and it's so important and consequential that it's like, anyway, it's interesting. So let's get back to your big theory, which could make this easier for Elon to make the Musk economy prosper faster. What's like this final outcome slide kind of wraps a nice bow on your proposal. So maybe like, let's run through what happens if let's assume the Tesla board takes a meeting with Tesla Larry, is like, you know what? Elon actually loves this idea. We're running with it. What happens next?
Well, I rate that probability as something like 0.1%. But, we'll have to issue about $1.2 billion of new shares, which would dilute present ownership by about a third. The market cap is going to jump to about 1.8 trillion. Musk's final Tesla stake would be 22.1%. Now that may change because I haven't factored in the outcome with this current. It could be that I haven't sufficiently factored in, I should say, the outcome of the board of the Delaware Supreme Court's decision. It could be slightly higher than this. But if you take Musk's controlled equity in Tesla and direct private, and you look at the valuation resulting from this deal, which, by the way, I think would increase the value of each of these companies, Tesla, he would become a trillionaire. He would definitely be, the outcome of this would be a trillionaire. And his path to 25%, all he needs another 2.9% through this approved option plan that he has, which is less than the first two tranches. So it gives him immediately a 22%, which is like a 4 or 5% increase in his current ownership, and it places him within two tranches of that 25% mark of Tesla. And so I think this would give the companies, the group companies, tremendous borrowing power, tremendous capital raise power, and it would give him a much stronger stake and control of the company, of Tesla, without yielding control of the subsidiary companies.
Wow. So, okay, I'm just trying to make some sense of this here. So basically we have Tesla issuing a third of its new shares.
Yep.
Adding $450 billion essentially in share count dilution, giving 280, like half of it to more than half of it to SpaceX, couple billion to Neuralink, couple billion to Boring, and then another huge chunk, $160 billion to xAI. And then we would own so then Tesla shareholders, we're looking at ownership of like a huge chunk of xAI. We're looking at, can you walk us through what as a Tesla shareholder, what would my percent ownerships in these other companies be?
So all you have to do is look at the third column. Tesla acquires pro rata 35.6% of SpaceX.
Oh, that's what we're looking at. Wow.
44% of Boring Company, 28.4% of Neuralink, and 69% of xAI.
Okay, I like this. I'm thinking we're going to need to adjust the numbers a little bit, though, because I'm thinking you undervalued Neuralink. Maybe that was what's throwing me off. Because I'm like, Neuralink I think Neuralink's worth like $25 billion right now, even though they're raising it like $9 billion or something. I don't know.
You may be right. You may well be right. And these numbers, I've got to state error and omissions accepted. I mean, I'm sure these numbers are not necessarily accurate because, firstly, I don't have the financials of each of these companies. I don't have the full, cap table of each of these companies, and I've had to do some estimation, and maybe my estimation's a little bit out. So, yeah,
but this is directionally very accurate, and you give room for like wiggle room on all these numbers, I think. And I think the point stands that now is the time to execute this thing because Tesla is worth so much where it could leverage its high price stock to actually get these meaningful ownerships. This may change. Tesla stock goes down, the other companies go up, then all the numbers start to shift around a little. So I think the math you've done right now of why this is the moment is what's so compelling to me, which in many ways is almost like you could say Tesla's overvalued in some ways relative to the other companies, and you're taking advantage of that. by this mechanism. Maybe that's a whole nother. There's a lot of things to consider, but that's one. I don't know. I think this would be extremely bullish if I was a Tesla shareholder, because I'm looking at it like we diluted 20 or 30%, maybe even 35, 40%. It's like, okay, that's still not an insane amount of dilution here. I think the Tesla business can grow 30, 40%. And now I've got a third of SpaceX. That's insane. Like a third of SpaceX, which all of a sudden at 1.6, let's say SpaceX goes to 2 trillion, that's worth like 600 billion, 700 billion. And then that already makes up for all the dilution and more. So I think it's interesting to me from a Tesla standpoint, where it's like we could acquire all these meaningful stakes with just this 20 to 30% dilution. It feels like a very strategic trade that for Tesla shareholders.
Golly, it's even better than that. Why is Tesla stock worth so much more than you can calculate out its value using standard measurements?
I mean, the Musk premium, it's the only Musk company you can buy, essentially, maybe. Growth. I call it the Musk premium, but I'm curious what you're going to say.
So the Musk premium is, let's drill a little bit into the Musk premium. The Musk premium is based upon all these projects that he has spun into this company. Tesla's got like the robotaxi, it's got Optimus, it's got the energy business, it's got some really serious projects underway. Now you spin these other companies in, and instead of 3 serious or 4 serious projects, you've got 8, 9, or 10 serious projects. So you've got even greater futures than you have with Tesla. So my argument is that this really, significantly expands what I would see as Tesla's premium over the standard market measures. So my argument is that the sum of the whole is much greater. The whole is much greater than the sum of these parts.
And what's the kind of phase 2 of your plan? Like, so let's say Tesla does this, acquires this stake. Is that kind of how it stays and they can all partner? Or are you thinking this is a broader stepping stone till Tesla eventually outright acquiring them all?
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And the time will come. Look, Berkshire was controlled by one man who had a couple of, maybe 4 or 5%. I mean, this puts Tesla in the absolute position to acquire like Apple. And I've argued for a long time that Tesla should take control of Apple.
That's a whole nother thing. Wait, give me why?
Well, for a very simple reason. Apple no longer, Apple is a dead company. Apple is a company that survives only from the strength of its iPhone. It survives based upon a product that was developed 20 years ago. It has lost its way in terms of, building futures. It needs a product manager. It needs Elon Musk. Elon doesn't have to buy 50% of it. 10%, maybe even 5% takes control of Apple.
Interesting.
But Apple is in desperate need of the greatest product manager they can lay their hands on. And the greatest product manager in the world, in my judgment, is Elon Musk. So Apple needs to hire Elon Musk. And how do they hire Elon Musk? They allow Elon Musk to buy control of Apple. Wow. You've got a bunch of old men. This is no country for old men. I mean, I'm the first to tell you that. I should not be in high tech. The youngsters, you and other youngsters, should be taking the mantle and are taking the mantle. I'm happy to invest in them, but they're the people who should be running and are running the businesses I'm invested in. Tim Cook and his they're not a gerontocracy, but they're all old men. They should not be in that business. So Elon should be in that business. Elon should be doing the hiring. They've done a terrible job of hiring. He should build a product team back up again that Tim just devastated. I mean, Tim Cook created China's industrial might, literally created it. I mean, he built that industrial might from zero to this giant power. Why? Because he just simply relied upon them to make better and better iPhones at cheaper and cheaper prices. And they learned to create an industrial might, an industrial power that the world has never seen before. He trained 28 million Chinese workers. I mean, anyway.
Well, I like what you're saying, because it's my interesting theory of like companies or countries in some ways are becoming so powerful. And so it's interesting to think of it in the lens of like economics has become the forefront of like war, I don't want to say, or geopolitical strategy has boiled down to economics and like economic strategy. Yeah. And so that's why I think what Elon is doing is he's such an American asset when you look at the world from that angle of like, bro, we need this player on our team. Like he went into China when they never wanted to let us have a factory and got like it's not Apple where Foxconn's building the cars. He's owning the factory. He's making a ton of profits. So
you can point to a handful of people who are transforming this country. Elon, the guys at Anduril, Rivian, if you like, but there are very few people who have built. A lot of space people who really are spin-offs from SpaceX, a lot of them, I mean, they are reinventing the United States as industrial base, industrial might. They are. There's no doubt about it. Who's destroying it? It's the Apples of this world, the people who are getting stuff made in China and selling them cheaply and selling, there's no invention, there's no inventiveness there, there's no product management there. So, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt at all in my mind that Elon has created the roadmap for the United States to resume its position in the world. And that's why I think he should acquire control of Apple. This plan gives him the means to do that.
For like geopolitical strategy, because it's almost like we didn't realize how hollowed out the U.S. had become and how weak we were, and like our incredible financial engineering to get the world on the dollar and exporting everything, or like, we export culture. That's it. We don't make anything anymore. Like that had gotten to a point of being such a blunder in this economic, game we're all playing, that I think that's the Tesla's in. And that's why I love when Elon says like, we're geopolitically, we're geographically diversified for geopolitical hedges. And it's like, that's why I always think is like, you're owning a business. Like Warren Buffett, as much as he wasn't in tech, his idea of like, there's a business behind the stock. It's like, this business is so strategic. Tesla, like they can do it all in house. They can do it on every continent. Like, and then you look at these other Ford and GM who outsource it and they can't do it, and they rely on all this other stuff. So it's like even though they do the same thing, the strength is so different, even though it may take like decades or centuries to reveal that strength potentially.
Right. Well, if you think of Warren Buffett, I mean, you have to be kind to the man because he's done an incredible job. And non-pareil, I mean, you can't compare anybody to him. But look at the industries he bought into. Railroads, carpets, I mean, oil, these aren't industries that are going to transform the United States. And by the way, he bought into Apple, which is consistent with, buying into old. He talks about building a business for the future and but all he's done is buy for the past. It's Elon that's bought for the future, and that is blazed the trail for the future of the United States. And so, I think that if he were to take control of Apple, it would change the future of Apple quite dramatically. There are other people who could buy Apple. Maybe Anduril could buy Apple, but it doesn't take a large percentage. I should get off the whole Apple thing. All I'm saying is that, Elon's empire should be retained as an empire because it is the possibility to build, to really share the knowledge and share the capability and share the financial strength to take on the challenges that he's identified.
And actually, now I love this Apple tangent we got on, because it makes me, it realizes, it sets on the importance of like, this may be the only way we combat China. If you go to China and you see how fast they're moving, like they have the Muskonomy. It's the CCP. It owns everything. It has
everything.
And so I think that's a kind of scary place that I feel like is the difference between a lot of people who are anti-AI and tech in the US. It's like, this is coming whether we like it or not. Like we can't just chill in this world that's perfect forever, and it's gonna get rocked and change. And it's either by like a non-democratic country that has zero like ideas of what we want or cares, or it's like our own homegrown thing. So I think people aren't realizing that as much as like Elon's our only hope, not the enemy in some ways. And the Musk, your whole pitch here, in many ways, to me, that's the first time in my head I'm like, ooh, now we really rival China with something big, powerful. Yeah. And why do I say that? Because mathematically, there's a key reason here. It's like the ability to move $100 billion like that and not think about it and make an investment. That's what it takes. We're at this point where we have the most technology, the most resources, the most potential, the smartest people, and all the money, but it takes spending that money and going. And that's like what we're so bad at. And that's why I like that Elon's a dictator, or that's almost a bad word for it, but like monarch. We've gone back to these systems realizing that monarchies with a mission are actually much more efficient than not. And and then the US has to become a pseudo tech monarchy to be able to stay relevant. And that's
so there was a monarch in the Industrial Revolution, and his name was Andrew Carnegie. If it were not for Andrew Carnegie, I don't think the United States would be would have reached where it reached by the 1930s. Andrew Carnegie, he brought Bessemer Steel to this country, and he actually made it happen. And absent him, I don't think we would be where we are today. In a way, Elon is like the Andrew Carnegie of our time, rather than the Edison of our time, rather than the Henry Ford of our time. Yeah.
I like Leonardo da Vinci. It just has a good ring to
it. Well, da Vinci was never a great success in terms of
like commercially. I feel like he had like a lot of one-off good things. That's why I'm like Leonardo da Musky. He has all the inventions, but he takes them to 1 billion people.
Exactly.
Exactly. Da Vinci's out here still sketching by himself.
Yeah. I mean, there's you could say that about a lot of people. I regard Elon like Henry Ford. Not Henry, his pal, Edison. Because Edison was responsible for so many inventions and for so many products that became standard in American life. I mean, there's almost no product that you could pick up today that doesn't have its antecedents back to Edison. Whether it's the phone, the phonograph, the batteries. I mean, of course, the electric light. There's almost nothing that is important in modern life that doesn't find its way back to Edison, and of course the generation of electricity. And so, people argue, well, he wanted direct current, not alternate current, and so on and so forth. But that was a trivial process compared to actually creating an electric system and electric lights in the city of New York. That was the nucleus of the explosion of electricity. And so he was responsible for so much change in our lives, more than perhaps any other single person. But, he didn't have Elon's financial acumen. He didn't have Elon's product management skills or product management genius, really. And so he never achieved what I think, he never achieved the heights that I think Elon will achieve.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can't even I feel like it's just, it's like a classic case of disruption where the thing that's better gets bigger than you've ever imagined it could be. And that's what we have with like one person. It's just that we need to rebrand Elon to inventor. Still call him a billionaire inventor, Elon Musk. Like, because to me, that's what is so interesting. It's like maybe other people have invented these technologies, but the idea of bringing them to so many people, like that's, yeah. And even though you said your scheme only has a 0.1% chance of working, how crazy is it to be alive at a time where you have Edison Damusky 10.0 and you're even pitching a scheme that has a 0.1% chance? Like, and I think 0.1% is bad, because I still think SpaceX IPO that's probably the way they're going to go. And that makes the most sense. And it's the most tried and true, and they can crush it with that. But I actually think one of Elon Musk's strengths is he does one move and he focuses on it. And he's always thinking long-term, but he's very loose about the long-term plan. And so to me, it's like, okay, we need 100 billion. SpaceX can IPO. We can get the 100 billion, kick off the orbital data centers, raise more money when we need to. That's the move right now. I'm not to like say he's not thinking about it, because we know he's thinking about it, but I just feel like that's and that's his strength, is that he doesn't get tied down to these big things. He just gets the next thing done and then is willing to move on. But in some ways, to me, there's a hint more. This is the $1 trillion. This allows $1 trillion of capital to flow very easily and much faster than if SpaceX were to IPO. So if your theory is right, that he really needs $1 trillion for all these CapEx projects, I think this gets his trillion faster. This gets the Muskonomy more successful faster than a SpaceX IPO. Like, maybe not for sure, but very good chance.
I agree. And there are so many projects that need so much money. You need something better than just a SpaceX IPO. You need to be able to mobilize gigantic amounts of money. And I think the combined entity will be just that.
Well,
and that would give them so many more shots at goal. I mean, each one of these initiatives, Orbital Compute, Gigafab, Cybercab Fleet, Optimus, these are each a shot at goal. Here we're combining them into one company. And so Tesla's valuation is very much tied to the number of shots at goal that it's got. And so, you have to think about Cybercab and Optimus. Can you imagine if you added Gigafab, Orbital Compute, and Neuralink, and Boring Company, and Mars to that?
And here's another thing to noodle on. Just last little point is, what when we have AI moving into the management suite? Is Grok not becoming a bigger percentage of management decisions? You have to imagine Elon's on the forefront of that. How much easier? I think the biggest bottleneck to AI, I'm realizing with my farming projects, is data, which sounds so dumb, but like, and even this other random company I just had on the Micro One, they're making they have $150 million business in like a year that they built, because it's just data labeling for these AIs essentially, because it's all about what we put in. So in some ways, like, you have all these companies getting all this proprietary data, feeding it back to the super Grok. Maybe that's an angle to combine these entities.
Absolutely is. You are right on target. Listen, I wrote a paper earlier two and a half years ago, that the guy who invents the best AI is not going to win. It's the company that has the proprietary data that makes their AI world beating. And so it's got nothing to do with how good the large models become. It has everything to do about what proprietary data that you own that is critical to your field of business. So if you own critical data that's unique to your field of business and other people don't, it doesn't matter how powerful their models are, you're going to win. And that's really the secret behind Tesla, and it's going to be the secret behind SpaceX, and it's going to be the secret behind Orbital Compute, and it's going to be the secret behind Gigafab. And so the larger this group is, the more the data repository that they own is, the more powerful they become.
Wow. And the corporate governance they need to allow that AI to communicate. Wow, I'm loving it. Okay, well, this was even more fun than I expected, Larry. I really appreciate having you on. It's a blast. Is there anything else we need to cover here?
No, I think I've probably bored a lot of people for a long enough time.
No way. That people loved your last episode. So, yeah. No, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone tuning in. Leave comments below on this idea because I feel like this is a crazy idea. Do you think it's a 0.1% chance, or is Larry being a little too humble here? Because I think it's actually, I don't know. I just think there's still, the last shoe hasn't dropped on the SpaceX IPO. So we're still in the scheming phase. So it's really cool to be able to have these discussions.
Thanks very much for having me.